On January 29th, 2026, silver did something it had never done in recorded history. 6 months later, it had lost almost half its value, and almost nobody can agree on why. Somewhere in a vault in London right now, there are stacks of silver bars that, on paper, are worth less than half of what they were worth in January. But the amount of silver actually being pulled out of the ground hasn't changed. The amount the world is using hasn't changed. If anything, the shortage got worse. So how does a metal get more scarce and less valuable at the same time? That's not supposed to happen. And yet, here we are. If you care about money, investing, gold, silver, or protecting what you've worked for, hit subscribe to Money Insights and like this video, because every week we break down the biggest financial stories in simple English. No jargon, no hype, just what's actually happening and why it matters to you. Let's go back to January. Silver had been climbing for months, and then it broke through a psychological wall that had held for 46 years, $50 an ounce. Twice before in history, silver had touched that number and been violently rejected. Once in 1980, when two Texas oil billionaires named the Hunt brothers tried to buy up nearly all the silver on Earth using borrowed money, until the exchanges changed the rules under them and the price collapsed in days. Once again in 2011, when investors chasing inflation fears pushed silver to $48.70, only to watch it get cut in half within a year. Both times, $50 was the ceiling. Both times, it held. This time, it didn't hold. Silver didn't just touch 50, it tore through it, then 80, then 100, and kept going, until it hit a nominal record of $121.67 an ounce on January 29th, 2026. For a moment, the unbreakable ceiling wasn't just broken, it was obliterated. Picture a small jewelry shop owner somewhere in Punjab or a coin dealer in Ohio watching the same number blink red on their screen, unable to believe it. Picture a retiree who bought silver coins 20 years ago as a hedge, suddenly finding they're sitting on triple what they paid. For a few weeks, silver felt unstoppable. Analysts were throwing around targets of $150, even $200, pointing back to 1980's inflation-adjusted peak. Because if you adjust that old $49.45 high for today's dollars, it comes out to somewhere near $194 to $200 an ounce. The logic seems simple. If silver hit that once before in real terms, why not again, especially with a shortage this severe? But here's where everything changes. By the end of June, silver had fallen more than 20% in a single month. By late July, it was trading around $58 an ounce, less than half of where it stood in January. The metal that had just made history for going up made history again, this time for how fast it came back down. And almost nobody saw the size of that reversal coming. Now, if you only knew the demand side of this story, that crash makes no sense at all. Because the supply deficit, the gap between how much silver the world uses and how much actually gets mined or recycled, didn't shrink in 2026. It grew. According to the Silver Institute's own World Silver Survey, produced with the research firm Metals Focus, 2026 marked the sixth consecutive year that silver demand outpaced supply, with the shortfall widening to roughly 46.3 million ounces, up from about 40.3 million ounces the year before. 6 years in a row, every single one of those years, the world used more silver than it produced, and every single year, the gap got covered by drawing down stockpiles that took decades to build and are not infinite. Think about what that actually means in plain terms. Imagine a household that spends slightly more than it earns every single month for 6 years straight, quietly eating into savings. At some point, either the spending has to stop or the savings run out. Silver has been running that exact math since 2021 at industrial scale, using up metal sitting in exchange vaults instead of metal coming freshly out of the ground. Why does the average person watching this care about a mining shortfall on the other side of the world? Because silver isn't just something sitting in a coin collector's drawer. It's in the solar panel on your neighbor's roof. It's in the phone in your pocket, the electric vehicle charging in a driveway, the medical equipment in a hospital. More than half of all silver demand today comes from industry. Not jewelry, not investors, industry. And industrial buyers don't stop needing silver just because the price goes up. They adapt, slowly, painfully, but the world doesn't stop building solar panels and electronics because silver got expensive. Almost nobody noticed this part. Solar panel manufacturers spent 2026 aggressively re-engineering their products to use less silver per panel, cutting silver paste content by roughly 19%, according to industry trackers, a process the industry calls thrifting. It sounds like a win for supply. Less silver needed per panel means less pressure on the shortage, right? Except global solar installations kept expanding by around 15% at the very same time, so even with each panel using less silver, the total number of panels being built kept climbing. Less silver per unit, more units overall, and the deficit still widened anyway. That's the part almost nobody talks about, The shortage didn't get better because manufacturers got smarter. It got worse despite them getting smarter. Here's the part most people miss. Roughly 3 out of every 4 ounces of silver mined on Earth aren't mined because someone went looking for silver. They come up as a byproduct of mining for copper, zinc, and lead. That means when silver prices spike, mining companies mostly can't just decide to dig for more of it. The silver comes out when the copper and zinc come out, on their own schedule, driven by their own economics. A price signal that would normally tell an industry, produce more, simply doesn't reach silver mine supply the way it would with almost any other commodity. Supply is, in a very real sense, deaf to its own shortage. Now picture a mining executive somewhere in Peru or Mexico staring at a spreadsheet. Silver just tripled in price. Shareholders want more of it, faster. But the mine wasn't built to chase silver. It was built to chase copper, and the silver only comes along for the ride. Even with the will to expand, bringing a brand new mine online from discovery to first shipment typically takes somewhere between 5 and 10 years, according to industry estimates. That's not a fast supply response. That's a response so slow that the shortage it's meant to fix might look completely different by the time new metal actually arrives. This is why, unlike oil or wheat or almost any other commodity you can name, a silver shortage can persist for years without the normal economic fix of higher price brings more supply. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ledger, other pieces of demand were quietly falling. Jewelry fabrication dropped roughly 8% in 2025 and was projected to fall by as much as another 16% in 2026, sliding to a 5-year low. Silverware demand was expected to fall by around 20%. Picture a bride shopping for a wedding set or a family buying a christening gift, quietly switching to cheaper alternatives because silver simply cost too much. Those are real people making real decisions in real time, and collectively, their retreat should have eased the shortage. It didn't. For every ounce that a jeweler or a silverware maker gave up, financial buyers stepped in and absorbed it instead through coins, bars, and exchange-traded funds. Global coin and bar demand actually rose through this period, even as the price climbed toward record highs. Retail investors, it turns out, were often moving on almost the opposite instinct from the jewelry industry. The more expensive silver became, the more some of them wanted to own it. So if the shortage is real and getting worse and mine supply can't respond quickly and even the industries cutting back are being offset by investors buying more, why did the price fall in half? This is where the story stops being about silver and starts being about something almost nobody was watching. A vault in London. Picture a warehouse, not glamorous, just rows of steel-caged pallets stacked with dull gray bars, guarded, insured, cataloged down to the ounce. That's the London bullion market, the physical heart of global silver trading. In October 2025, something broke there. Traders needed to borrow physical silver short-term and couldn't find enough of it. The cost of borrowing silver, something called the lease rate, which normally sits below 1%, spiked to levels reportedly near 39%. That is a number so extreme it hadn't been seen since the Hunt brothers cornered the market in 1980. At the worst of it, only around 17% of the silver sitting in London vaults was actually free to move. The rest was already spoken for, locked up in exchange-traded funds and client accounts. A market that looked, on paper, like it had plenty of metal suddenly discovered it had almost none it could actually deliver. That squeeze is a huge part of why silver rocketed to its January record. It wasn't only investors betting on inflation or war, it was a physical plumbing problem. Banks and traders scrambling for real bars they had promised but didn't have sitting in a vault, driving the price up simply to convince someone, anyone, to release metal. And then the pressure eased. By February and March 2026, the freely available share of London's silver had recovered to somewhere around 24 to 28%, still thin by historical standards, but no longer an emergency. The panic-driven premium came out of the price just as fast as it went in. That single mechanical shift, from we cannot find silver to we can find some silver again, helps explain a huge chunk of why the price fell so hard, even while the underlying deficit numbers barely moved. Here's a contradiction that should stop you in your tracks. The same month silver was crashing, the 6-year deficit was still getting worse, not better. Scarcity, on paper, increasing. Price, in the real world, collapsing. Two numbers that are supposed to move together were moving in opposite directions, and the reason is that price in the short term isn't only about how much metal physically exists, it's about how much metal people believe they can get their hands on right now, this week, this month. Belief moved faster than the mine data ever could. Now, here's the part that connects everything back to why this matters for you, whether you own an ounce of silver or none at all. There's a number traders watch called the gold to silver ratio. Simply, how many ounces of silver it takes to buy 1 ounce of gold. Back in November 2025, that ratio sat around 80 to 1, meaning silver was historically cheap compared to gold. As silver's mania peaked in January 1st, the ratio collapsed to under 50 to 1. Silver suddenly expensive relative to gold, a level rarely seen. By the summer of 2026, after silver's crash, the ratio had climbed back up to around 65 to 1. Major bank researchers, including analysts at JP Morgan, describe themselves as cautious on silver in the near term specifically because of that ratio compression, waiting, in their words, for silver to become more fairly valued again before stepping back in, with one estimate placing silver near $85 an ounce by the end of 2026. Why should a family watching this from their living room care about a ratio between two metals? Because it's a window into how fear and greed move faster than facts. When investors panic about currency debasement, war, or inflation, they don't calmly calculate mine output. They chase the number that's already moving, which pulls the price further from what the physical market can actually support, in either direction. That overshoot, in both directions, is what just happened to silver, and it's the same emotional mechanism that has driven every bubble in financial history, from tulips to tech stocks to this. Think about a retiree who had spent years quietly buying silver coins, one roll at a time, as a form of insurance against a rainy day. In January, watching the price nearly triple from where they bought it, that decision must have felt like validation, proof that the years of patience had paid off. By July, watching almost half of that paper gain evaporate, the same person might have felt something closer to whiplash. Nothing about their coins changed. The metal in their hand was exactly the same weight, the same purity, sitting in exactly the same drawer. What changed was the mood of a market thousands of miles away, in a London vault most of them will never see. That gap between what an asset physically is and what the market says it's worth at any given moment is the single hardest lesson every new investor eventually has to learn, usually the hard way. And here's a mini cliffhanger worth sitting with. This entire swing, from record high to near halving, happened inside a single calendar year, not a decade, like the run-up to 1980. Not even a full year, like 2011's slower unwind. Months. If a market this large, backed by a shortage this severe, can move this violently in this short a window, what does that tell you about how fragile the whole pricing system underneath it actually is? There's a bigger pattern hiding underneath all of this, and it isn't really about silver at all. It's about the environment silver is trading inside. In February 2026, war broke out between the United States and Iran, and by the summer, hostilities were still active, with fresh American strikes on Iranian targets reported as recently as late July. War in that region tends to do one very specific thing to markets. It pushes oil prices up, and rising oil prices push inflation up. And inflation is exactly the kind of pressure that's supposed to make precious metals more attractive as a hedge. Yet the Federal Reserve, at its July 2026 meeting, chose to leave interest rates unchanged, even as inflation pressures were building from the conflict, and markets were pricing in roughly a 63% probability of the Fed actually raising rates in September, not cutting them. Sit with that for a second, because it's counterintuitive. Historically, precious metals tend to do best when interest rates are falling, because holding gold or silver, which pay no interest, becomes more attractive when bonds and savings accounts pay less. A Fed that might be raising rates, not cutting them, in response to war-driven inflation, is a genuine headwind for silver, even while the same war is theoretically a reason to want a safe haven. Two forces, inflation fear pulling silver up, tighter monetary policy pushing it down, pulling in opposite directions inside the same headline. That tension is arguably the single biggest reason silver has been so violently unpredictable in 2026, swinging from record highs to a near halving in a matter of months. Reality check. None of this means the deficit story was wrong, and none of it means the crash was some kind of manipulation or conspiracy. Markets often overshoot on the way up and overshoot on the way down, and the honest answer is that both the record high in January and the sharp pullback by July were, in their own way, rational reactions to real information. A genuine physical squeeze in London followed by genuine relief when that squeeze eased, layered on top of a war and a central bank trying to fight inflation without derailing growth. Some analysts believe the structural deficit means today's lower prices could eventually prove to be a floor rather than a warning sign. Others believe the crash shows the January spike was more speculative froth than fundamental reality. Nobody can responsibly tell you which camp will be proven right, and anyone guaranteeing you an exact price target on this metal is selling you certainty that doesn't exist. What we can say, based on the data, is this. Mine supply for silver has been essentially flat for roughly a decade, hovering near 800 to 830 million ounces a year, because 3/4 of it depends on decisions made in copper and zinc mines, not silver mines. Meanwhile, new demand sources, electric vehicles, artificial intelligence data centers, high-speed electrical infrastructure, are growing even as solar demand shrinks per panel through thrifting. The Silver Institute's own outlook calls for a sixth straight year of deficit in 2026, and depending on which research house you ask, next year's shortfall could either narrow, slightly as high prices force more substitution, or widen further if industrial demand from AI infrastructure and grid build-out accelerates faster than expected. Historically, markets that experience a violent supply squeeze, followed by a sharp price collapse, don't just fade quietly into irrelevance. Picture the Hunt brothers in 1980. Having spent nearly a decade quietly buying silver with borrowed money, pushing it from around $1.50 an ounce in 1971 all the way to $49.45 by January of 1980, only for the exchanges to change their trading rules almost overnight, effectively forcing the brothers to sell and watching the price collapse by more than 80% within weeks. That crash didn't just punish two billionaires, it ushered in more than 2 decades of depressed silver prices, a hangover so long that an entire generation of investors grew up believing silver was simply a bad investment. Then picture 2011, when a wave of post-financial crisis inflation fear pushed silver to $48.70, just shy of the 1980 peak, before it was cut roughly in half within 12 months, as that fear cooled and the Federal Reserve's emergency measures began to look less alarming than markets had feared. Both of those episodes shared a pattern: a rapid, emotionally driven spike, followed by a rapid, emotionally driven retreat, followed by years of quiet consolidation before the next real move. If 2026 follows that same rhythm, the current pullback to the high 50s may not be the end of silver's story. It may simply be the market catching its breath after sprinting too far, too fast. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it does rhyme, and sharp squeezes tend to leave scar tissue in the market. Thinner vaults, more cautious traders, a physical system that remains fragile for a long time after the headlines move on. That fragility is exactly what several analysts inside the industry warned about even after London's vaults stabilized in early 2026. The recovery, in their own words, is real, but it's fragile, and another wave of buying, another tariff scare, or another sharp price move could recreate the same conditions that caused the squeeze in the first place. So here is the powerful realization underneath everything you've just watched. Nobody expected silver to hit an all-time high in January, and then almost as few people expected it to give back nearly half of that gain within 6 months, even as the underlying shortage grew worse, not better. The lesson isn't that silver is doomed, and it isn't that silver is guaranteed to soar again. The lesson is that in a market this thin, this dependent on byproduct mining, this exposed to a handful of vaults in London and New York, price and physical reality can disconnect from each other for months at a time. And when they reconnect, they tend to do it violently, in one direction or the other. For an ordinary family watching this, the takeaway isn't to panic, and it isn't to chase headlines about $200 silver or fear headlines about a crash to $30. It's to understand that precious metals, historically, have moved in cycles measured in years, not weeks, and that the loudest headline on any given day, record high, brutal crash, is rarely the whole story. Whether you're a worker setting aside a small amount each month, a parent thinking about your children's future, or a retiree who already made your decision years ago, the same principle applies. The asset in your hand didn't change overnight. Only the market's mood did. Understanding that difference calmly is worth more than chasing any single headline ever will be. The physical shortage that built up over 6 consecutive years didn't disappear when the price fell. It's still sitting there, quietly, in vaults with thinner floats than they used to have, waiting to see whether the next catalyst is another Federal Reserve decision, another flare-up in the Middle East, or another quiet week in a London warehouse where, once again, almost nobody was watching till it was already too late to ignore. If you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe to Money Insights and like this video. More powerful financial insights are coming next.